Russian dictator Vladimir Putin deceived US President Donald Trump and intensified shelling of Ukraine after their meeting in Alaska. This statement was made by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in an interview with Fox News. According to him, Washington is considering all possible options for sanctions against the aggressor country, Russia. Bessent noted that Putin's actions do not match the statements he made during his meeting with the American leader.
After the meeting in Anchorage, after the phone conversation when European leaders and Zelensky were at the White House, Putin acted the following Monday in direct opposition to what he had indicated he wanted to do. In fact, he intensified the bombing campaign in a deplorable manner.
Bessent emphasized that all options for sanction pressure on Russia are possible. According to the finance minister, the United States will be studying them very closely as early as this week. Meanwhile, the White House press service announced the first appearance in a week by US President Donald Trump. It is noted that on September 2nd, the American leader will make an important statement. The US president has already set deadlines for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin more than once. For example, earlier Trump gave the Kremlin 50 days to establish peace in Ukraine. Soon after, he said he was disappointed by the lack of progress and announced a new deadline of 10 to 12 days. But even after the meeting between Putin and Trump took place, the Kremlin leader did not take any steps toward a peaceful resolution. On the contrary, he intensified the shelling of Ukrainian cities. For example, as a result of a massive Russian strike on Kyiv on August 28, 25 people were killed. This demonstrates that Putin has no intention of stopping the war he started. On September 2nd, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin held bilateral talks in Beijing. During the meeting, Putin thanked the head of the People's Republic of China for the warm welcome, called him a dear friend, and also spoke of the strategic relationship between Russia and China.
I sincerely thank you for the exceptionally warm welcome that has been extended to our entire and distinguished delegation. Our consistently close and effective communication truly reflects the profoundly strategic nature of the Russian-Chinese relations, which are currently at an unprecedentedly high and significant level.
As reported by CNN, Putin also recalled the friendly relations between the USSR and China during World War II, in particular the Soviet-Chinese Brotherhood in Arms. In turn, Xi Jinping called Putin an old friend and stated that the relationship between Beijing and Moscow has withstood the tests of a changing international environment. According to the Chinese leader,
China is ready to work together with Russia to support each other's development and revitalization, firmly uphold international fairness and justice, and build a fair and reasonable system of global governance.
CNN notes that during his visit to China, Putin will also meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. As Reuters writes, Xi Jinping's reception of several dictators in China undermines the authority of US President Donald Trump. It is noted that the meeting between Putin and Kim Jong-un demonstrates the Chinese leader's influence over authoritarian regimes that are trying to change the world order based on Western principles. Meanwhile, against the backdrop of Putin's visit to China, Russia's Gazprom and the China National Petroleum Corporation signed a memorandum on the construction of the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline, which is intended to deliver gas from Yamal to China through western Siberia and Mongolia. According to media reports, the project had been on hold for a long time, but Beijing's interest in it returned this year amid the war between Israel and Iran. In Beijing, preparations are underway for a large-scale military parade to mark the anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, which will take place on September 3rd. The streets of the Chinese capital are closed off due to columns of military equipment. As part of the parade preparations, at night they moved along the city's main thoroughfares. It is known that the event will feature modern examples of Chinese weaponry, and the parade will conclude with a flyover of 100 aircraft. In this way, Chinese leader Xi Jinping aims to impress the world with a show of force, demonstrating the latest weaponry and his alliance with authoritarian partners. As The Guardian reports, for the first time, all of the United States' key rivals will gather on one stage during the parade: Chinese leader Xi Jinping, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Earlier, on September 1st, the city of Tianjin in China hosted a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which brought together the leaders of Eurasian countries. According to the New York Times, at this summit, Putin was greeted with friendly embraces, and the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine was not raised. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine also noted that the final communique of the summit made no mention of the largest military aggression in Europe since World War II. As reported by Sky News, at the summit, Russia and its allies tried to demonstrate their defiance of Western pressure. It is noted that Putin's program in China is intended to emphasize that his relationship with Chinese leader Xi Jinping is stronger than ever.
Ukrainian defense forces have cleared the village of Odakny in the Pokrovsk direction and raised the Ukrainian flag there. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The General Staff also confirms that Ukrainian troops have liberated the settlement of Novoye Ekonomichnoye in the Donetsk region. This was previously announced by the 425th Skelia Regiment, whose soldiers raised the blue and yellow flag. The village holds strategic significance as it is located on an important logistical route, the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd-Konstantinovka highway. Thus, the Russians' plans to split up our troop groupings in the Donetsk region remain unfulfilled. This summer, Russia failed to break through Ukraine's defenses on any section of the front, laments former Russian FSB officer Igor Girkin.
It's a disgrace. Over the summer, we didn't break through a single section of the front. In 16 months, we completed the assault on Chasiv Yar, while during this time, Ukraine allowed its youth to travel abroad. If Ukraine were on its last legs, they would have already started drafting 16-year-olds, but everything is fine for them.
Girkin was referring to the recent decision by the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine to allow young men aged 18 to 22 to travel abroad freely. Girkin Strelkov himself was sentenced to 4 years in a penal colony for extremism in January 2024. Before that, he actively criticized the Russian military leadership and Putin. Russian regions are also suffering because of the war in Ukraine unleashed by Putin. Rostov-on-Don came under attack by UAVs on the night of September 2nd. Local residents reported 15 explosions.
They hit Yelani. I actually saw the drone.
Fires broke out in 2 apartment buildings. According to local authorities, there were no casualties. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that supposedly 13 UAVs were intercepted and destroyed over the Rostov region during the night. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated that he discussed ways to end the war with Putin in China and by phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to him, the leaders are not yet ready for direct negotiations. Erdogan emphasized that the potential for peace remains and that Turkey supports a gradual increase in the level of negotiations. However, the conditions for a meeting between the leaders are not present at this time. Earlier, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan held a telephone conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The leaders discussed the peace process, bilateral relations, and regional security. Erdogan wrote about this on the social network X. During the conversation, Erdogan stated that Ankara is ready to continue facilitating the end of the war. The Turkish leader also stated that Russia must return the illegally occupied Crimea to Ukraine. Recep Tayyip Erdogan assured that Turkey's support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence is unwavering. The return of Crimea to Ukraine by Russia is a requirement of international law, the Turkish president emphasized. Meanwhile, Russian ruler Putin made a number of absurd statements during a meeting with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico in China. He claimed that Russia allegedly did not strike Ukrainian energy infrastructure, especially during the winter period. According to him, Russia supposedly tolerated Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy facilities for a very long time, and only then began to respond.
We tolerated it for a very long time when Ukrainian forces were constantly striking our energy facilities. After that, we started to respond.
Putin, who previously blackmailed Europe with supplies of cheap Russian gas, advised Eastern European countries to cut off gas and oil supplies to Ukraine in order to stop Ukrainian attacks on energy infrastructure. Putin, who unleashed the bloodiest war in Europe in the last 80 years, also assured Fico that supposedly any reasonable person understands perfectly well that Russia has no intention of attacking anyone. According to the Russian dictator, the Russian Federation has never objected to Ukraine's membership in the EU, but NATO is a different matter. In addition, Putin declared his readiness to cooperate with American representatives at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which Russia illegally occupied in 2022. Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced plans to keep payments for Russian gas in Turkey. President Erdogan made this statement during a meeting with Putin at the SCO summit. According to the Turkish president, the money for Russian gas will be directed toward the construction of the Akuyu nuclear power plant, which Rosatom has been building in Turkey since 2018. In other words, Russia is building a nuclear power plant in Turkey with its own money, explains military expert Sergei Bratchuk. At the SCO in Moscow, they also had to make concessions to Beijing. Gazprom and the Chinese company CNPC signed a memorandum on the construction of the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline, which is intended to deliver gas from Yamal to China through Western Siberia and Mongolia. According to Gazprom's CEO Alexei Miller, this pipeline will allow the gas company, which has faced serious financial problems since the start of the war, to increase its supplies to China to about 100 billion cubic meters. The agreement is set for 30 years. The price of supplies through the pipeline will be lower than for Europe, Miller said, adding that they plan to consider it later. According to Russian economist Vladimir Milov, in reality, there are no actual agreements on the construction of the Power of Siberia pipeline.
If you have signed a specific supply contract, if there is a price, if you haven't agreed on a price, then whatever you have signed is anything but a supply contract, yes. So this is just another memorandum. Gazprom, of course, has a huge problem in that it's hard for them to keep dragging out this Power of Siberia 2 project. That is, it's clear to everyone that nobody needs it. That's why I think they persuaded the Chinese to sign yet another declaration of intent.
Power of Siberia 2 has long been at a standstill, one of the reasons being China's demand to buy gas at domestic Russian prices, as reported last year by the Financial Times. Miller's latest statement may indicate that, at least partially, Beijing has achieved its goals by securing lower prices.